This email marketing strategy generated over $30 million in the last 12 months. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire thing. This is not your typical YouTube tutorial in that I'm not going to make this an hour long and try to make it seem more complicated than it is. This is really just going to show you exactly what you need to be doing right now inside of your brand in order to make email marketing work for you. In this video, I'm going to be covering specifically how to grow your list and the best practices around that, specifically how you need to be setting up flows to be turning your subscribers into buyers, and then the exact campaign strategy you need to be implementing today in order to make sure your buyers are going to come essentially for years to come. I'm going to make sure that the ad spend that you're putting into your business is not going down the drain, but really nurturing buyers and making sure they're going to come back. And this all starts with building your list. All right, so even though this does seem like a really obvious first step, a lot of brands really just don't pay the most attention to it. This is the first thing that we need to be making sure when you're driving the traffic to your site, is because they're potential buyers. We want to make sure that we own them and are able to nurture them over time. So the first thing as far as that is making sure we capture their email. So what does that look like? It's typically a pop-up. And what does that look like as far as the strategies that go into that? We need to focus on our offer, we need to focus on timing, and then from there, that's when we can start getting into some more advanced A/B testing in order to figure out what might be best. In the case of offer strategy, things like making sure we're using 10 to 20% discounts, that's pretty normal for a lot of the typical brands that you're going to see. But as far as higher end brands, you're going to see things that are more complicated when it comes to new customer offers, things like gift with purchase. Mystery offers are really good for engagement, and then also potentially, if you have it, lead magnets also work to kind of create that more premium positioning. As far as some more list growth tactics, making sure we have compelling homepage opt-ins, specifically if we're looking at blogs, specific upgrades there. Checkout collection is huge when it comes to e-com, especially when you're having that very lower part of the funnel collection point, especially when people are about to purchase. Very important to collect there. And then things like exit intent pop-ups on desktop is going to be huge. From there, as we talked about, looking at things like optimal timing layouts, when it comes to 6 to 12 seconds is typically what we see as best, but just depending on the brand, it could differ from there. Changing your copy, and going through those those pieces of optimization can get you to a point where you're having a much safer and much higher conversion rate. As we keep going through here, strategically, pop-up implementation can, in the case of looking through it, multi-step pop-up forms. When I say that, I say this to specifically our brands. We're like, hey, multi-step is going to be the way to go. Typically higher conversions. What does that look like? In the case of this, what we start with is what we call micro commit. Micro commit from a psychological standpoint is essentially like, hey, we're gonna have this question that we're gonna ask, and they're gonna hit yes. Hey, do you want to get X off of your, hey, you want an offer? Do you want to accept it? Yes. The person from that point from going forward has that yes mindset, and they're gonna be more likely to convert into giving your email. So what I recommend always is trying out a micro commit, and then from there, optimizing based off of device. So in the case of mobile versus desktop, obviously very different customer experiences, but we also want to make sure that it's is the pop-up actually fit on their screen. In the case of a desktop pop-up, it's not really going to be typically functional for a mobile device, so you actually want to make sure that you have a desktop version and a mobile version optimized for both experiences. From there, like we said, then you can start kind of optimizing based off of triggers. 6 to 12 seconds, as we said before, is the way to, at least in my opinion, to start. But from there, you can focus on visuals, copy, timing, offers, and so on and so forth. But that is what makes up a well-executed pop-up. As we continue to go down here, this is really where it comes down to where we're gonna have it. One of the key places we like to test from time to time is even having a homepage hero section. Specifically, we like to do this when we have things like brands that have very enticing new customer offers. Think, hey, in the case of this, let's look at Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens runs a lot of different offers all the time. They're constantly testing their new customer offer. When you get onto their website, it's right in your face. Great marketing from that standpoint. But hey, here's the offer. Here's the gifts you're gonna get. Here's how you sign up for it. And in that case, they're gonna ask for your email, and that drives you through an entire funnel. So as long as you can master that portion of it, this is really big, because at the end of the day, if you're not converting people off of the ad spend you're sending them, which is really that high-end focus on traffic, that's where you're going to lose them. So biggest portion of this, biggest takeaway, make sure we're collecting the email. So from there, you can look into things and maybe you have a blog. Also a good point to potentially hey, if I have a blog specific to a specific piece of content, and I'm getting a lot of traffic to there, let's look into creating a sign-up form that's specific to that, that's really geared into that, and we can see a very high conversion rate off of that. Behavior-based targeting. You can also do it based off of browsing patterns. Are they on certain pieces of the site? Are they looking at specific products? this is where you can get very, very advanced with it. Now, with bigger brands, this is very much worth it. Smaller brands, maybe not so much, but something to keep in mind. All right, and then as far as technical infrastructure, one of the big things that we look at with our clients is would they like to use platforms like Reveral, Retention.com, and Black Crow AI, which are those identity resolution tools that are able to identify those anonymous visitors. A lot of people are driving a lot of different visitors to the site. If we can collect them and get them into our ESP, great. Let's get them into Klaviyo. Let's get them a few emails. If they're not that engageable, maybe we subscribe or unsubscribe them, put them through a sunset. But at the end of the day, they're very, very valuable people that are getting to the site. They have interest in your brand. They probably want to hear from you. So let's collect them. Going through things like data management, looking at things like creating specifically great segments, which are very, very important for things like your campaigns. Same thing that goes all the way down to quote unquote, flow filters, making sure that all the people that we're getting into our brand, we're having as many data points on them so that we can create the best quote unquote experience for them based off of personalization and whatnot. So outside of that, make sure we have our analytics set up correctly. And from there, we can very, very easily and very, very accurately identify the people coming into our brand. Now, I'm going to convert into the next piece here, which is going into automations. What you need to do is think of automations as your 24/7 sales team. Really, if you think about it, when you engage with a brand for the first time, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to convert. You're probably going to need multiple touch points. So as we talked about before, inside of the pop-up piece, we're trying to collect their email. And the reason being is that we want to put them through a very, very, I'm going to call it planned out sequence of touch points. In the case of email, what's that going to look like typically? A welcome series. Welcome series is where you're going to build that trust, you're going to build that authority, and you're going to build and address all those objections that prospects might have towards making that first purchase. Really, flows should account for about 50% of the revenue that you're seeing from your email channel. They are really, really nurturing at the most important points. For a welcome series, we typically tie it to a pop-up, and we know what the person's supposed understanding of the brand at that point should be, and then from there you can craft a really, really strong set of emails that gets them through to the point where they're going to potentially want to convert. As we go through it, and the biggest thing that I'm an advocate for is looking at customer journey. We're going to go through abandonment flows. Hey, did they get to a point where they were just viewing the product and then they left? We can get them back with a browse abandonment. If we got to the point where they're adding to cart or even doing a checkout, we could do a checkout abandonment. These are all very, very high leverage flows that need to be put in place because they are when the customer is most wanting to purchase. And from that point forward, after the purchase, then we want to start on post-purchase sequences. Things like replenishment flows, win-back sequences, instructional sequences, anything that's going to make the customer feel good about their purchase. That's when we move into that. Things like review sequences and whatnot is also good. From there, then you can start doing win-back campaigns, win-back flows. That's when you can start doing win-back specific personalized offers. Hey, I saw you bought this. What about this? Maybe I haven't seen you in a while. Here's a discount to get you back in the store. At the end of the day, these people are people that have signed up with you. They're interested in your brand. They trust you. All they may need is something to get them right back in the door. And that's where it gets into what, like we said before, starting to categorize those different people, trying to figure out what makes them tick, what will make them come back. All right, so let's go next into flow length and timing strategy. Getting a little bit more into it. Your welcome series, your abandonment flows, your post-purchase, your replenishment pieces. A lot of businesses do struggle with making these, either too short or too long. Flow duration and timing does depend on your niche and your customer journey. Welcome series, I hear a lot of people push like 8 to 12 emails. In my opinion, we haven't seen too much ROI with that. We recommend a very, very strong 3 to 4 emails. From there, then our campaign should step in and kind of take up the slack from there. But those 3 to 4 emails, making sure that social proof is there, making sure we're getting a founder story, whatever we can do to really communicate to the user and to the person reading that email that, hey, this is the brand for them. This is what we're doing for you, really just to solve your issue or whatever it might be. That's where you're going to see the ROI. More touch points at that point, typically what we see is we see a significant drop off. So I do recommend focusing on those 3 to 4. Abandonment sequences, just because they are at such a lower point in the funnel, longer sequences can work with this. And especially if you have like a high value product, look into things like discount ladders. Start with like a reminder, then go potentially to like a smaller discount or like an offer, and start increasing that as you go. If you don't, if you think that your customer cycle is longer, then obviously spread that out a little bit longer. But if you really are of the opinion that, hey, if this person doesn't convert right now, then let's just go for the gold. Start to push different offers. Try and figure out what makes them tick, what makes them convert. And then from there, you can figure out like, hey, free shipping is the issue here. Hey, maybe they just need more of an offer. Hey, they're looking for this gift. That's how you really narrow in those specific flows. Post-purchase. Post-purchase experience is king. We want to make sure that we're, making sure product delivery, making sure that, from product delivery all the way through to the next time that they purchase, that experience is strong, making sure they know how to use the product, making sure that, at certain usage milestones, like we say here, if it's a subscription in this case, that's, those are the times to recognize and congratulate the user. That's really how you capitalize on those peak satisfaction moments. Replenishment, really, really big on replenishment here myself. If you have a brand that is huge on specifically a consumable thing, and they only purchase a one-time purchase, we want to make sure that they're getting either a replenishment or they're moving to a subscription. That's why that's a key flow there, and that's why we want to make sure that as part of the timeline there, that's being capitalized upon. All right, let's go on to the next piece. Personalization and segmentation, huge part of flows. As we said before on the pop-ups, really keeping track of that structure, keeping track of the specific people going into these pieces, the information tied to them, what did they view, what did they engage with in the past. This is the kind of stuff that we need. So looking at that, how can we do this and incorporate this in our flows? Well, things like specifically having dynamic content, behavioral triggers, specifically lifecycle customization, custom audiences. All these things can make the customer experience go from really just being like a 1 on a 1 out of 10 scale to a 10 out of 10. As somebody who is in the email side of things, I want to see stuff that's relevant to me. Tailor the recommendations that you're seeing as far as if you're doing a win-back campaign. As far as behavioral triggers, I love to see specifically myself, and even when I push strategy, browse abandonment emails that are tailored to the last thing that I looked at. If you can make it as really personalized to my experience as possible, that's going to make me feel that much more attuned to what, hey, the brand really wants me, and they really think that this is what I need. Lifecycle customization, we have new subscribers, first-time buyers, loyal customers. We have many, many different things, and they all should receive, if you're at a certain level of brand, take this in this way, they should receive specific messaging tailored to them. Custom audiences, specialized flows, these are the key pieces that at the end of the day make us, want to purchase. These are the personalized pieces that really reach out to us, and specifically us, and that's why you see increased engagement rates and really conversion rates is what we're after. So big portion of that, definitely recommend it. Look into things like product recommendation engines. Those are the big pieces of it. You can leverage Klaviyo for this piece, but this is a huge, huge part of email marketing. As we go further into it, optimizing those flows and going further. Cross-sell sequences. I didn't talk too much about that, but specifically cross-sell sequences. If I've purchased X, doesn't make sense to purchase Y. We should, like Amazon, say like, hey, potentially recent customers have bought this. This is what we might recommend. This is, like we said before, personalization and segmentation. We want to make sure that the emails going out to our customers are the ones that make sense to do so. Do we want to increase post-purchase value? We want to make, like going back to what we said before, usage guides, inspiration, support. That's what we want to do to make sure that the customer feels good about their purchase. Win-back sequences and replenishment reminders, we've gone over those. Those are very, very important post-purchase pieces and really, really big customer journey things that we want to touch on. All right, so now that we're done with flows, let's move into the big part of really email strategy, which is email campaign strategy. Once you're at the point where you have a bunch of people signing up to your list and you have a bunch of flows to guide them through those journeys, now we really want to focus on sending out actual campaigns to the list because we want these customers to continue to buy. We have to educate them, nurture them, and this is really where you're going to see a lot of those repeat purchases. In the case of email campaign strategy, the sweet spot that we see for most of the brands that we work with is 3 to 4 weekly campaigns. One of the biggest things that a lot of brands miss out on is that they do not have a good balance of campaigns. When brands are pushing 3 to 4 weekly campaigns, they may default to a lot of promotional based campaigns, but that's not what we want to do because we don't want to train our buyers to expect sales. That's the exact opposite. Because then what that leads to is that if a brand is training their buyers to expect sales, you're not going to see that many sales unless you actually get to a point where you're doing a promotional, and that's really not what we want to do. So what I recommend is that in the case of 50/50, do a lot of nurturing and education based campaigns. Explain to them why the products are loved. Show them social proof. Go through with them why the specific ingredient side of your consumable product is the best of the best. Those kind of things are what converts the buyer from somebody who's more of a skeptic to thinking of yourself as more of the industry leader and more of that, really that educational figure. That's the biggest thing. As far as campaign types, lots of different. I put 7 campaign types here as like an example. There are probably a lot more than 7 campaign types that I can think of off the top of my head, but at least come up with 7 of them that you can rotate through. Use things like specifically, founders letters. You can do weekly digests. There's a lot of different things that you can do to really keep your consumer really just engaged with your brand and wanting to see more. And as we keep going, let's keep going on to this next piece here. We want to make sure that your deliverability and technical foundation are strong. At the end of the day, if you have the best content, it can go all to waste if it's all going to spam. So how do we do that? Let's make sure deliverability is strong. Let's start with the technical setup. Make sure that you have your branded domain set up. Make sure you have your DMARC record set up, your SPF and DKIM records for verification set up. Those are just the basics. From there, obviously reputation management is huge in today's age, specifically with Gmail, Yahoo, because they use reputation algorithms to kind of dictate what the sender reputation is. If you're sending a bunch of emails to people and they're not engaging with them, then Yahoo and Google are going to see that as a negative kind of message to them to be like, hey, in this case, XY brand is sending emails to our people and they don't want to see them because clearly they're not opening them or clicking them. That's why we have to make sure that when we're segmenting out our users is that we're really keeping a deep eye on things like click rates. Open rates are kind of bogus at this point with Apple MPP, but that's for another video. List hygiene. Regularly clean your list. Make sure that you're segmenting based off of those engagement levels. Has somebody not clicked your emails in the last 365 days and they received like 10 emails? They're probably not going to engage for a little bit. Maybe we should look at pausing them for a little bit and then re-engaging them a little bit later. Or maybe we just need to create a flow for that. There's a lot of options there. And then monitoring inbox placement, apps like Glock apps. There's a lot of different things that you can use to track that, but maintaining and looking at your inbox delivery, making sure stuff's not going to spam, making sure that if you can, trying staying out of promotions. That's a little bit harder to do, but still something we should pay attention to. As we keep going through here, engagement-driven email design. This is going to be huge for you. Make sure that your emails are visually, capturing all of that engagement and driving conversion rates. Effective design, there's entire things on this, but specifically look at how you're capturing the interest from the first, paint is what I'm going to call it, of the email. When they first open the email, what do they see? Well, if it's just a single picture with no CTA above the fold, probably not much, much that the user is going to see immediately, and they're going to, potentially log off from that email. So when I focus on that, strategic CTA placement is huge. Making sure that when they're looking through the email that they're getting all the information. So that scannable hierarchy, making sure we have that visual priority from 1, 2, 3, 4, so that anybody who's looking at that email can know within a few seconds, hey, this is what it is. Either, hey, they're offering me a lot of value, or hey, they're pushing a promotion. You should know that very, very quickly. And then also making sure that we're optimizing for specifically mobile. I don't know how many of you guys are like myself, but I'm very rarely looking at email on my desktop. So whenever we design emails, we make sure that mobile is 100% the first thing we have in mind. So making sure you're designing emails for mobile and desktop is going to be a huge part of it. And that should be everything that you're going to need to craft an email marketing strategy in 2025. You should be able to get through this on your own, but that being said, in reality, there's going to be a lot of trial and error. So if you want to leverage the years of experience from a talented email marketing agency, feel free to book a call down below and we'll have a chat. We've done this for countless other brands, even like Maseo. We've taken them from a few $1,000s a month up to $100,000 a month, and we can do the same for yours. So if you're having any issues, let's have a chat. We'll go through it, have that little go through and do a little bit of an audit. With that being said though, I'll see you next time.